Okay, so just a few, I guess, preliminary thoughts as we move into chapter 3 of the book of James. The chapter 3, a good portion of it is about the tongue, and actually that does start in verse 1, though not so directly. So I'll just kind of give a bit of a prelude because I don't want to steal any of Pastor's thunder as he gets ready to bring us a few full-blown messages on the importance of controlling our tongue. Okay, so in any case, let's just do a little background and then I'll go directly to the question and some answers. So now in this chapter, James is going to be looking at a discussion of the believer's behavior, and it begins with sins of the tongue. And because teachers, as you might be well aware, do a great deal of talking, he begins with them. So he has two observations in the verse. We'll look at James 3:1. My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. Okay, so one of the observations is don't multiply teachers. My brethren, be not many masters. Okay, that's the first part. Okay, and don't misunderstand teaching, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. So the word here, masters, has the same meaning as teacher or doctor, and it is very important to know because teachers are under a special obligation not only to practice what they preach, okay, but also to ensure that what they teach is true. So every Sunday morning when I get up here and I teach, I have that burden on me. And I always pray, I want to get this right. I want to get this right. I've heard Miss Nancy say that before. I just want to get this right because this is no small matter. Okay, this is not teaching somebody that, something that, here today, gone tomorrow. This could affect somebody's theology for life, and we don't want to do that in a negative fashion. Okay, so to lead people astray with the wrong information is a very solemn thing. Okay, and teachers, we as teachers, and I have to put myself in this category because that's what I do on Sunday mornings, we will be held accountable for the doctrines that we teach. And we have to know that sincerity is not enough. Okay, somebody could be the most sincere person in the world and truly think that they can perform brain surgery on you. Okay, but if they don't know what they're doing, it doesn't matter, and you would not, if you had any control over the situation, just trust yourself to just anyone for that kind of a matter. Sincerity is never sufficient in and of itself. Okay, so we don't know exactly what James had in mind, but it may have had in mind the controversies among teachers about the relative merits of faith and works. He brought that out in chapter 2. Or perhaps he's targeting teachers who substitute words for works, so people who say but do not do. And we had many of those kinds of encounters in the Gospels, right, when Jesus was dealing with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Okay, Jesus was chastising them because they were living the letter of the law, but they weren't living the spirit of the law. Okay, so we know that teachers are necessary, but we don't need the kind that Paul warned against. He knew people who had itching ears, and in 2 Timothy 3, he wrote, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears." Okay, almost any, not every, but almost any presentation on the radio or television these days, sadly, is very weak in their presentation, or they will certainly omit things, and a lot of it's positive, and there's nothing wrong with preaching positive message. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but you have to balance it out. There you can't only preach heaven and not preach hell. I mean, what would the allure of heaven be if there were no hell? And more importantly, what would be the reason for Christ to die if there were no hell? So you take away, when you downplay that or you sugarcoat it, you are downplaying and sugarcoating Jesus' fulfilled mission. Okay, so James, also with his strong ties to the synagogue, probably had in mind the open platform policy common in the synagogues. Okay, so there was an open platform there. Okay, so this custom made room for visitors and others to speak to the congregation. We see this in the Gospels, the Lord Jesus speaking in the synagogues. And then in the book of Acts, we see Paul speaking on many occasions in the synagogues. Okay, so they took advantage of this feature of a synagogue worship. But what was the problem with that? Well, the problem was that, of course, much profitable teaching would have come from that. I mean, just the Apostle Paul and his teachings, and Jesus in the Gospels and his teachings certainly would have been profitable. But guess what? That opens things up to. So it would open things up to people who did not teach truth, or people who thought they were more qualified to teach than they actually were. Now, there is nothing new under the sun. Where do we see that today? Social media. Okay. Social media doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing, and in many ways, it has expanded the playing field for the freedom of expression of ideas. The downside of that is that anyone can say or print anything, and if they sound authoritative, people will flock to them. Okay, so a lot of mediocre teaching will be going on, and also an abundance of quote-unquote self-appointed quote teachers, people who only thought they had the gift of teaching. So God is going to hold all of us as teachers, as James warns, accountable for what we say. And we can take a look at Matthew 12:36. Jesus said, "But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." Okay, one of the things that we have to be very careful about is there's basically, let me back that up a little bit. You can be wrong about a lot of things in the Bible, but there's one thing that you cannot be wrong about: salvation. You can't be wrong about that. You can be wrong about, whether Saul saw Samuel or didn't. There's room for discussion and debate on that. You can be wrong about how old David was when he had the encounter with Goliath, or how old Isaac was when he was ready to be sacrificed. There's all kinds of things, and I'm just giving very extreme examples. There's other things that we can be wrong about. I'm not recommending that we be wrong about them, but I'm just saying you don't have to be right about everything, but boy, you better be right about salvation, because that's where it begins, and basically that's where it ends. I'm not strictly speaking, but you have to be right about that. Okay. Interestingly, and I'll get to the question in a moment, this afternoon when I had the encounter that I mentioned earlier in the prayer meeting with the student Lena, I gave her pastor's example of the wedding ring, and how baptism is only a symbol. And she said, "Wow, that's a really great example. Did you make that up yourself?" I said, "No, I got it from my pastor." But she was very impressed with that, and I think she might be able to share that with other people, and that would be a good thing. Okay, so we have to be right on those things. Baptism, sacraments, nothing, good works, none of that stuff saves us. And if anybody is proclaiming themselves to be a teacher and teaching those false doctrines, they're going to be held accountable before God, not only for themselves, but for all the people that they led astray. And if that's not a sobering thought, I don't know what is. And that's why I always want to make sure, boy, do I want to get it right, whether I'm teaching, preaching, or sharing anything from God's word. Okay, so with that as a background, let's go to question number 37. And we have, what do those who are experts or in authority have to be aware of? So we have answer A, they are more accountable. We have answer B, they are beyond judgment. And we have answer C, they will always be respected. Okay, we're gonna take a look at answers B and C first, and we're gonna look at them because they are the, as you might have guessed, the incorrect answers. Okay, so we have to understand that leaders are not just people, true leaders are not just people who proclaim themselves to be leaders or even necessarily in positions of leadership. Okay, so we have people who are in positions of power, however that may have come about, and they may even be in a position of, tyrant. They may be tyrants or in a position of tyranny. Okay, sometimes it could be attributed to some sort of genius that they may have had. Other times it'll just be circumstance or family or background or whatever the case might be. But these people who are in this position of power think that they will always be respected. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a person who's in power in the form of government or in the form of politics. You have people who have a big influence or impact on society at large, talking about famous people. Now, we all know, and most of us here have lived long enough to see people's careers rise and see people's careers fall. Some falling flatter than others. Okay, and that could be politically as well. Politically, it could be in the entertainment field. Okay, but regardless of what happens, these people will tend to overestimate their wisdom, their genius, and thinking that's what got them where they ended up. Okay, but the end. At the end of the day, one is not wise just because they hold an office or they can have sway or influence over other people. Okay. And we see this very often with teenagers too. What do teenagers do? Teenagers copy whatever they think is cool. Okay. So, but the big thing is, what's cool today is not cool tomorrow. If you don't believe me, just try to learn slang. You find out a slang word today, you use it tomorrow, and they're going to look at you like, that's so 5 minutes ago. So, yeah, that's how quickly things change. Anything or everything that can be a commodity, a hot commodity, a trending commodity, here today, gone tomorrow. And just because something's popular, of course, we know doesn't make it right. And of course, just because something's right doesn't make it popular. Or I guess what's right is not always popular, and what's popular is not always right. We've heard that before. Okay, but we know that a lot of people who are in power, whether again it be political power or through their own influence on society at large or the culture, is because the way the media props them up. And if the media ever stops propping them up, which it has in specific cases, and I always wonder, what did that person do to stop earning the favor of the media to keep him or her up on that quote unquote throne? You just have to ask yourself, well, that's because they were not so smart in getting themselves there in the first place. In many cases, it's a product of engineering and the media. So, think of it this way. How many millions and hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on political campaigns in such a short time? And a lot of times people will say, oh, the reason such and such candidate lost was because they just didn't have the funding. So you're telling me it wasn't the platform that got them elected, it was the funding that got them elected. The TV spots, the radio ads, the newspaper clips, and all the people that they hired to get out, get people out to vote and to vote for, such and such candidate. So we're going to go back then. So what do those who are experts or in authority have to be aware of? Well, it's not that they're going to be beyond judgment, because we're all going to be judged. Okay? It's not that they will always be respected, because no matter how high your peak is, there's nowhere to go but down after that. But it is they're going to be more accountable. And a good and true leader knows that a large part of his success is based on his ability to perform. And also, I would even add to that, is knowing that others helped him or her get there and acknowledging that. We don't succeed without the help of others, and that might be in the form of our parents who raised us right. It could be a teacher who directed you on the right path. Okay, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to give credit where credit is due. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said this. He said, "Imagine all that we could accomplish if no one cared who took the credit." And I think it's not biblical, it's not scripture, but that is really there's probably a proverb that could match up with that somewhere. I wouldn't be shocked. But that is true. Everybody's too busy trying to pat themselves on the back, and instead of saying, you know what, I've surrounded myself with good people, and this is why I've had this amount of success. But I am going to be accountable for all of them, because I'm still the one that's making all the final decisions. And if anything goes bad, I can't point to anyone but myself, because I'm the one who's accountable for all this. Okay, so anyway, the accountability doesn't come from just all the superficial things that are part of what goes on. It's not the superficial qualities that are going to sustain us. It is that we need to humble ourselves, and we need to know if we are truly capable of what we're setting out to do. And if we are, then we also need, again, to be able to give credit where credit is due. That doesn't mean that you had no role in this, or no role at all. But my point is that we don't want to, have everybody doing everything for you and then just walk up to the podium and say, "Hey, I did such a great job, everybody, didn't I?" Yeah, that would not play well. Actually, that wouldn't play well for your audience either, because they're usually smart enough to know that you didn't get there by yourself. Okay. Now, this can also negatively impact pastors. Pastors can get, caught up in this kind of a thing too, because pastors usually will say, based on the scripture, "Thus saith the Lord," and if they're not careful, they'll think that everything they say is "Thus saith the Lord." So I, as a teacher, or when I'm preaching, not as a pastor, but as a preacher and as a teacher, I have to be careful of that too. So it's easy to fall into that trap, to say, "Oh, what a great job I did." It's like, no, I'm so glad to God that He gave me this message and that He allowed me to preach it, and I just pray that it will touch people in the way that God wanted them to be. And if we can maintain that humility, and we can, and if we accomplish the things that we do with humility, then we won't have to worry so much about being accountable, because we're already taking that into consideration. So anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to share tonight. And if anybody else wants to add something to that or to comment on that, feel free. Okay, Brother Tone. Oh, Miss Nora, I'm sorry.
The colleges, um, the people from the left, they focus on education, and because many of the things that the anti-Semitism that is going on in the colleges is brought about by what the teacher teaches the student.
That's true.
That's why it is very hard to to combat it or to prevent it, because the movement that these students or other people from the left, like the socialist, their socialist belief, this has caused too much trouble in the country, especially now, with the big universities like Harvard, and they are the ones that are propagating the teachings, the wrong teachings about what the people should do or believe, where in fact we are in a democratic country, or what do you call that? The
We're
republic.
a constitutional republic.
Constitutional republic. So that's the reason why teachers are very important and should be very careful in what they teaches the students, because they if they are really very convincing in how they communicate whatever their own agenda or
That's
their
right.
own belief, then the students will believe them, and then will be the strong followers of this wrong ideology.
Yeah, and that before I get to Ms. Nancy, I just wanted to say that the sad reality is that in most college campuses, most professors are not teaching. All they are doing is spouting their social, their spin on social justice and their own ideologies, and that's what the kids are walking away with, which is why you see them protesting all these traditional values and they. I mean, I always ask, if you hate the country that much, why are you still here? So I think I might have gotten this from Charlie Kirk, but he says, look, it's the greatest nation in the world. Even the people that hate it can't leave. So, I mean, if you really hate something that much, I say this all the time. There are trains, planes, and and ships leaving the country every day. No one is forcing you to stay here. Get yourself a one-way ticket and go somewhere else, and then and after about 3 months, when you realize how good you had it, we'll see you when you come back.
A very good example is Ilhan Omar, who is always saying things against the United States. Meanwhile, if you know her background, she is a refugee from Somalia, and she's living a good life here. Can only happen in America,
Yeah.
and nowhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And some people are volunteering to give her a first class ticket going to Somalia.
Yeah.
And stay there,
One way.
One way.
She
So-
can, yeah, she can have any meal she wants on the way over there. And here's a little secret: she wouldn't be in a position of power in Somalia. Yeah, and she knows that. It just goes to show you that. I mean, in what other country could you win a position of power through an election, and then just go on for your whole term about how you hate the country that you're in?
She is only winning because a majority of the population in the district where she belongs are Somalians.
Right.
And of course, she has to, make sure that she is, looking into their welfare, even, at the expense of America.
Yeah, well, you mean that figuratively and literally, but anyway. Okay, Miss Nancy, you wanted to say something?
Yes, keying off what Miss Norris said, it just seems like a very common deceptive bunch of phrases that the left will always use, whether it's in colleges, whether it's in the media. They always try to cast their view as the intellectual, the fair view. They have compassion on the underdog. They want equality for everybody, and they just make it look like there's no justice unless everybody has the same thing as everybody else, because there's this entitlement attitude. And even this guy running for mayor of New York City, his views are so extreme, I think even the most left newspapers are saying, yeah, this is a little too far. Free groceries, free this, free that. I mean, the guy is an admitted socialist. And he is really not a friend of Israel at all. But he wants everything fair and equitable. These are buzzwords that they know will guilt people into, well, yeah, we would, how can anybody not be for fairness and compassion? And they don't want to be thought of as, in the 70s, the Archie Bunker mentality. Aaron Spelling deliberately portrayed him as a misguided patriot. And it was like setting the stage for making people that are conservatives look like ill-mannered boors that were selfish and hated anybody who was different, and didn't want equal rights for all people. And I saw a lot of this even back in the 90s when I was at Jersey City State. But this is practically every liberal commentator or on the news, you always see these same words woven through all of the stories.
Yep.
That they just have a way of looking down on anybody who's got a platform of true patriotism.
Well, I'd love to help Bernie Sanders, or what's his candidate's name?
Mamdani. Yeah.
Mamdani, because my net worth is much less than theirs. So, I mean, let them start off. I'll just walk up to them and say, hey, guys, I mean, I'm all for equity, too. Can you guys help me out here? I'm worth a mere pittance compared to what you are, and I'd love to help you push your platform along and show everybody by example how you can just take care of that in, one fell swoop. Just trying to help. Go ahead, Ms. Donna.
Fairness and equity for everyone except Christians.
Well, yeah, that's generally the case. That's right.
This is loud. I heard today that there was a commentator on CNN that was criticizing Ted Cruz and Mike Johnson, who are both Christians, because they are revelation seekers, meaning that the only reason they support the bombing of Iran is because they want Jesus to return. And it's no decision politically will make Jesus return.
That's true.
And no decision made here will affect what God is going to do.
Also true.
But it was a criticism of Christians.
Yeah, well, if you're an ignorant commentator, you make remarks like that. Pastor Ziron?
I wanted to expand on something that Nancy just said about these people that are the professors and they claim to be the authorities. There's something that has come out in a lot of Senate hearings and other places, that one of the quick ways to try to silence somebody who has something to say is what's called credentialism. Okay, they'll ask, well, do you have a degree in this subject? Oh, if not, then why are we bothering to listen to you? And really, the idea is also sort of what she said. These people who are the professors and supposedly know what they're talking about, there's a big assumption that they had a balanced education. And that's what credentialism is as well. You got the document, you got the degree, so that must mean that you had a fair education. No, it doesn't mean that at all. I mean, it might start off that way. It reminds me of how people will dress a certain way, dress like the pop stars, like you were saying, or whatever, but they, or dress like an executive, and they're really just empty suits. It's nice to have that. I mean, if you're a success, then maybe as a person is dressed that way, people will give them some extra credence, but then they expect them to know what they're talking about. And that's where things especially fall apart, especially with teenagers when they try to dress like somebody successful. Okay, fine. But now let's look and see if you have substance. And especially with people in authority, they might be an authority in one area, but that doesn't make them an authority in every area. Maybe they had a business success, they sold a company for $1 billion, gazillion dollars. Well, that's fine, okay? But you don't know what you're talking about with regard to morality or politics. That doesn't make you an expert in everything. And people really just assume, oh, well, somebody's a success, so that must mean that they know everything else too. When it comes to accountability, this is something that also capitalizing on what you were saying, I know when I'm going to prepare for preaching or for teaching or whatever, one of the things I've got to do is anticipate how I might be wrong or how I might be challenged, because maybe I'm not saying it the best way. And so I got to figure out, well, is this actually the best thing to say? Should I defer to saying this because I should make a point stronger? And if somebody were to challenge something, which does happen periodically, far more often than people think, typically I'll have like 30 of the things I didn't get to put into the sermon that I'll say, well, yes, okay, that's true, but here, and here, this goes up. And sometimes as I talk to people who are able to help me see that, when they look at things, and I can prepare better that way. So this whole thing about accountability is for those who want to be authorities. It's really a big subject.
It is.
But people shouldn't shy away from it.
No.
What they should do is get studied. Put in the time and think and make sure that you can be ready to give an answer for the hope that lieth in you.
Exactly. And that's really the whole process behind apologetics, being able to support what you say. It's not just making claims. Anybody can make a claim, and people do that. And people equate making a claim with proclaiming truth. Just because I said it, that means it's true. And they just say it, and if they say it loud enough and strong enough, that means it's true.
Weak point. Pound pulpit.
Yes, pound pulpit, hard, because it's a weak point. I'll get to Miss Nancy in a moment, but the one thing I wanted to mention, that speaking to what you mentioned before about some of the so-called professors, they say, oh, well, we have such a balanced university here with balance of ideas. That's because they think we have a liberal from this background and a liberal from that background and a liberal from this background and that background. If you really want to know how balanced the university is, ask them, how many of your department chairs are conservative? The answer is not going to be many. Miss Nancy, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think, as my husband said, we shouldn't shy away from it, but just be studied, but always keeping in mind that warning from James, because I think the idea is don't just want a position or a title or to be in front of people because you're so important, because you're going to give an account more so than others.
Exactly.
If you're in that position.
Just think Hebrew national hot dogs.
Yeah, it's a fearful thing to handle the Word of God.
That's right.
Because it's a great responsibility.
It
and
is
some people
tremendous.
Diotrephes loveth to have the preeminence. You know, they like to be the big shots that have all of the sway in the church. But God will really hold people like that to much greater accountability.
right.
I mean, churches have been split over the dumbest issues by very stubborn people that had clout and money and power for generations.
Yep,
And it's just very sad.
that's right.
Yeah, think of David in the census. You know, all Israel got judged because he had to give a greater account.
How about it? Ms. Nora, did you have your hand up?
Probably President Trump is correct in dissolving or trying to dissolve the Department of Education, because it's really the focus of, with what has happened during the COVID and how the teachers reacted to it or use it on for their own good.
Right.
That's why I'm so happy that with why the president of the what do you call this, the teachers union, is already resigned because she has no more power and she is not happy about it. But the thing is, the children is the focus. You know, like of all the things that they did, starting with the critical race theory, and also with the implementation of the DEI in all schools and in all the companies, and using DEI in choosing people in certain positions. They don't consider, like they consider the balance, like with the color and like, which is dangerous. Like with the what do you call this, the how it's a part of this DEI, that some of the dangerous things that's happening, especially with the airplanes, like what do you call that, the controllers, it is affecting the life of people.
It does.
And especially with the education, it's affecting the life. They have the oppressors and the, the oppressed, all these things going on. And this is not good for this country,
No,
because it does not reflect the values by which this democracy, the constitutional republic, was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for meritocracy, and that's really what we're talking about here, is if you can do the job, you get the job. Okay, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter. If you're from this background and you can do the job, you get the job, and that's it. And that's the way it goes. But, you're right, it does happen that way. And it does affect people in a real sense. And, it should never be that way. I mean, I don't want somebody doing a job with a lot of responsibility merely because they filled some quota. I want them to do that job, which is dangerous, because they have proven that they are capable of doing it. Whatever background they may have, it doesn't matter to me what the background is. If you can do it, you do it. If you can't do it, sorry. I mean, there's other jobs out there. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but I have yet to hear a feminist clamor that there are too many garbage men out there and not enough garbage women. Where's the outcry? Same thing with sewer workers. I mean, come on, what's the ratio? 99 to 1? I mean, somebody's asleep at the wheel. Just saying. So, all right. Anyone else? Any final thoughts before we go ahead and close?